Okay, so we finally got some new cards. Finally have new packs coming out. So I'm finally gonna hopefully start playing the game again some more. And as part of that, I should probably review the new cards that came out. Look over them at least briefly. We'll see if I can keep this under 30 minutes or not. Probably not. So the first card here we have is the Aged Craftsman. This is not pulling up large pictures of the cards. That's annoying. I don't know if I should click on each of them individually. Sure, here we go. Aged Craftsman. 3 cost. The icons are barely relevant. 1 strength power is terrible. But the ability is pretty good. After it enters play, search the top 10 for a Night's Watch location with printing cost 2 or lower and put it into play. And it enters play and it costs 3, so you can use it with Flea Bottom. And this card also combos with the new Flea Bottom Alley that we'll see below. Aptly named Flea Bottom Alley to put in the Flea Bottom character. But yeah, I would say this is a builder's card. You put this in a builder's deck, and it has a considerable amount of synergy. You can spam out like your Haunted Forest and your Brandon's Gift and things like that with this ability. And the fact that the icon and like strength ratio is so terrible, you don't really care about because you're playing builders. You have a sort of a different like win condition compared to just winning challenges normally. I think this card definitely goes in that deck, but probably not any other deck because 3 for 1 power icon only is just so terrible as a character. The reaction doesn't really make up for it if you're not playing like builders or at least some type of core set wall deck. Then we have Alysanne Mormont. A new start character, 3 costs, 2 strength, these 2 icons. While each character you control has a Stark affiliation, she gains stealth for military and doesn't kneel to attack in military. So, reasonably decent character. I mean, there's no problem activating her ability. Having every character as Stark it's like harder to find a reason to not have all your characters as Stark, in my opinion, right now. So, the issue is that Stark is just like overloaded on decent characters to play around this cost spot, but she definitely goes in what is that Sea of Blood because she's a military stealth, so she's definitely good there if she gets played. And she also goes with the, I think it's called Bear Island Scout. It's like the 2 cost loyal non-unique where when you put it into play you can go and search your deck for a House Mormont character. So you can definitely use her along with that card, and I think that's actually pretty good as well. So I think she might see some use. At the Gates, the first city plot. This is a plot 401. When revealed, search your deck for a limited with 1 or lower, reveal it and add it to your hand. Put it into play instead if there are no city plot cards in your used pile, and then shuffle. And 7 reserve. So this seems like a very solid opening plot. Let's say that the limited location you get is worth at least 1 gold. You play this, and it searches your whole deck, not just the top 10, so you're guaranteed to get whatever you want. You play this, you put it into play. It's basically a 6 gold plot because you get a 1 cost into play for free, and you get the income of that additional limited location right away on top of the 1 limited that you're allowed to play per round because this is put into play. It doesn't count towards that limit. It's 6 gold. It's sort of card advantage. At the very least, it pulls that limited out of your deck, and that makes your average draw a little bit better. It has 7 reserve, which is nice for the first turn, because that's usually when you'll have the most cards in hand, unless you're playing a very slow deck, possibly. And you get the cumulative advantage of every turn of the game after the first one, compared to opening with any other plot, you will have an additional limited in play, which on top of what you would have had in play otherwise. So I am definitely considering using this, even if you don't use any other city plots. It just compares pretty well. If you compare it to like Time of Plenty, it's just better. Like I said, it's basically a 6 gold plot, potentially 7 if you do something like get a Great Hall and use it to pay for a large character. It also has the 7 reserve, and it has the advantage of putting an additional economy into play. Definitely think that this will see some play. Baelor Blacktide, Greyjoy character, 4, 2 icons, 4 strength. Each opponent cannot play copies of events that are in their discard pile. And he's captain, and he's the 7, which is a little bit interesting. So he's not a lord, and he's not Ironborn. That's a little bit unfortunate. I don't know how much the Ironborn trait really matters. I guess I've seen some Greyjoy playing Vanquish the Unbelievers, but I'm not sure about this card. I lean towards him not being used because it's just too high of a chance that his ability literally won't do anything. And 4 cost, even though he has a decent strength to cost ratio, a 4 cost that doesn't really have a consistently relevant ability is probably just not quite good enough to make the cut. Like, my experience with Greyjoy is there's already not really enough room for all the cards that you want in terms of like good characters, so I don't think he's going to be that useful. We have City of Secrets, the second city plot, 4/4/1/8 reserve, and this is the city draw plot. When revealed, each player draws 2, then each player without a city plot in their used pile chooses and discards 2 from hand. The use of this will depend. I don't think it'll be used because either city plots are useful and they're good and people are running city plots, in which case this plot just draws 2 for both players, and it's like, that's not that good. Just play exchange of information at that point. It's 1 less gold and you're drawing 2 or 3, as opposed to you draw 2 and the opponent also draws 2. Or city plots are not useful, in which case this isn't going to be useful because you got to play city plots in order to mitigate the downside of this. And it's not like, if it said, when revealed, then each player without a city plot revealed chooses and discards 2, that would be one thing, but it's not that. It's without a city plot in their used pile. So if someone is just using At the Gates, and that's their only city plot, but they're just using it to open with, then they won't have to discard for this. And this plot is bad because you're giving them 2 cards as well for no reason, really. And even if they get to choose and discard, it's still an advantage to them because you're letting them filter by 2 cards, which could still be pretty significant. So I don't think this really will be used because of that. I don't plan on using it. I guess we'll see. Then we have the gates. Every faction gets a gate economy location right away in the first pack. I'm always glad for them to put in more economy options, and I think it's great that they're just doing them all right away in the first pack. These aren't going to be as strong as the 2 cost economy locations were from, like, I think the cycle before the last one maybe, but the cycle that introduced cards like Dornish Fiefdoms and Arbor Vineyard, those created like power spikes for Martell where they had like the Dornish Fiefdoms and other factions didn't have their 2 cost economy yet. Though there was also an issue there where most of those ended up not really being worth using. Like Dornish Fiefdoms might have been the best one. Basically, these are more balanced, I think. These are, and I like the idea of these, adding consistency because they're money, and then you can also use them to draw later. The first one is the Dragon Gate for Targaryen. Basically, all these except the Night's Watch one have the same format. 1 cost limited location plus 1 gold. Challenges action, some condition you have to fulfill, and then you can sacrifice the location to draw 2. For Targaryen, it's if you control 2 or more attachments. So this will go in the Daenerys Voltron deck, or like the Qohor Queensguard decks, I guess, but although Qohor and Queensguard tends to not be Targaryen main faction, they'll usually like go Greyjoy or Tyrell or something. But for quote-unquote regular Targaryen decks, the ones that's just like playing all the dumb cards and trying to play burn events and stuff, I don't think this is that good because those decks typically play Crown of Gold and no other attachments. And even if you're playing like 3 of Milk of the Poppy, that's not really enough to consistently activate this to get 2 or more. So probably not worth it for those decks. Gate of the Gods, the Tyrell Gate. The condition here is if you control a character with the highest strength in play, sacrifice Gate of the Gods to draw 2. Definitely could see some play in Tyrell. Obviously an easy condition for them to fulfill. Any deck that's based on, or that has like Randall Tarley in the deck and has strength buff effects to activate Randall Tarley can also easily activate this card, and then you can use it to draw. Flea Bottom Alley, this is the Night's Watch one that is a little bit different. I think it's a little bit worse. It's awkward because it's kneel and sacrifice to put a Night's Watch character with printed cost 3 or lower into play, then draw 1 card. So it's like a King's Road, but it's really considerably worse than the King's Road because the King's Road is just a flat -3, which you can then apply to a character which costs more than 3. this can only be used on characters that cost 3 or lower to begin with. So unless you use it to put exactly a 3 cost into play, it's not even getting you as much econ value as the King's Road. Like using this to put a 2 cost into play, it only saved you 1 gold as a one-shot effect, which is, I mean, since it replaces itself, you draw 1 after you sack it. I guess that's still not necessarily bad, but I think it's questionable. I was looking at a Night's Watch deck that I've made recently, and I'm just like, yeah, there's maybe 4 or 5 characters in the whole deck that cost 3 that I can use this with. And it was like, I really don't think it's worth it. I don't see myself really wanting to use this to like put Messenger Ravens into play. I don't know. I think I'm happier just sticking with like Underground Vault, Rose Road, that type of stuff. The deck that I think you will probably use it is Builders, because with Builders you have a bunch of 3-drops, and it also doesn't matter that much if you're not totally efficient with it, if you just use it on a 2-cost character. Plus with Builders, most of your deck is 3 cost or lower in terms of characters, as opposed to, let's say I could, in a situation where I actually have a reasonable number of mid and high cost characters, you could end up with a hand where like this is stuck in your hand and there's no good characters to even use it on. But that's not really going to happen with Builders. And with Builders, the draw effect is quite good. You really want to filter and draw a ton with Builders to find all your pieces. So I think that's the deck it goes in. Because, also you can combo it with the Aged Craftsman's pretty good. Kingsgate, this is the Baratheon one. Baratheon actually got a pretty good one here. If you have 5 or more power on your faction card, you can sack it to draw 2. Obviously a pretty easy condition to fulfill. It's pretty likely. It's actually pretty synergistic in a way, because the idea of these is you play them early and then later in the game when you're running out of cards you use the effect. And obviously later in the game it's much more likely you'll have at least 5 or more power on your faction. So I definitely expect this to be used in Baratheon. This might be the one that is used the most consistently. To me, I think because Baratheon still has sort of a lack of other good economy cards, this could definitely be an option for them, and their draw is not that great either. Their draw a lot of times is like Red Keep or Bust, so maybe they need this. Iron Gate, Greyjoy location here. If you're the first player, you can sacrifice it to draw 2. Also a condition that Greyjoy can definitely do, because right now it's completely popular to use Silence and Refurbish Hulks, so you should be winning initiative, and that way you can use this to draw. And it's also pretty good with Greyjoy, I think, to use this and sack it to draw 2, because what will often happen with Greyjoy is you'll play, after you get all your big expensive characters out of your hand, you're like, well, I don't have that much left that really takes that much gold. I really like to draw some more cards. And so this would be good to add some consistency there. Then we've got the Lion Gate, the Lannister one. This is probably the worst one, because the requirement is if you control 2 or more cards in Shadows. I guess the Targaryen one is not very good either. But definitely this condition is like, I think you have to be playing more of a dedicated Shadows deck to activate this. And in a Shadows deck, perhaps it'll see some play, because then, if you control 2 or more cards in Shadows. But in like a more sort of normal deck, I mean, how many Shadow characters or cards really are you even playing? Like, for my experience with Lannister, it's Sir Robert Strong, and that's about it. So, not really going to be that easy to activate this. Old Gate, the Stark version here, this one's really easy. This is probably the most consistent out of all of them, because it's just if each character you control has the Stark affiliation. So you can just guarantee that this is always active from turn 1, just don't put any neutral characters in your deck. And like I said with Alysanne, it's pretty easy to do with Stark. Stark's like, what neutral characters would you even play? Stark has so many good ones to use instead. So this could definitely see some play in Stark. And with Wyman Manderley Fleabottom being restricted, their draw engine is not as good as it was, so maybe they would appreciate this effect. Definitely could be used. Alright. Oh, there's one more gate. Let's do the River Gate. This is the Martell one. If you have lost 2 or more challenges this phase, you can sacrifice River Gate to draw 2. Martell might use this. I'm not sure, because Martell really appreciates drawing cards. But at the same time, it's like the opponent can kind of play around it. If they don't want to let you use it, then it's like they won't let you lose 2 challenges. I don't know how significant that's going to be. I give this one a maybe. We'll see what happens. And again, since Dorn got restricted, then maybe Martel will want to use this to have more draw. Although, honestly, you can just go back to Secret Schemes, and then it's like, do you really need more draw? I don't know. I'm on the fence. Anyways, now we've done all the gates. Let's get back to the characters and other new cards. We have the R'hllor Infiltrator, a Baratheon character here. This is kind of an interesting, weird card. It's a little chump, 2 cost, 1 strength, 2 icons. Dominance action, kneel R'hllor Infiltrator to choose an opponent, give control of R'hllor Infiltrator to that player, and gain 1 power for your faction. I am on the fence about this card. I think it could be good, but I don't know. We'll see. So first of all, the stat line is nice because Baratheon really needs playable 2-drops. So maybe this is a playable 2-drop. I guess we'll see. The ability is like, do you ever really want to give your opponent a character? That's arguable, but at the same time, it's a chump. And, you know, giving your opponent a chump as Baratheon, you often don't care because you're not trying to, like, win by, you know, clearing their board anyways. And it doesn't have a power icon, so I think like the Baratheon dominance or power control decks, where they're just trying to control the power challenge and then sort of just weather the other challenges however they can, maybe it's good, because it might be worth it at that point to play this and just get another power for your faction, and then give your opponent a 1-strength military intrigue that's like, they're not really going to be able to use it for much that you care about. And you can also have some synergies with this where you use it with like the First Snow of Winter. That'd be pretty funny. So you give it to the opponent and then just flip First Snow, and they never get to actually use it, and you can marshal it and use the ability again to get another power later. But that requires you to play First Snow and Baratheon, which probably isn't worth it. There was something else that someone pointed out where there's some type of combo you could do with this card to sort of mitigate the downside, but I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, so whatever. And I guess one issue is the opponent can also like just give it back to you, and they can also get a power for their faction. I don't know. This is a weird card. I don't know how I feel about it. I skipped Littlefinger, so we have the new Littlefinger. This is a big boy Littlefinger. 6 cost, or Shadow 6. So if you play him from Shadows, he's 2 and then 6. So 8 cost. That's a very expensive Shadow character. Reaction. Oh, he has Stealth, 2 icons, 4 strength. After a character you control comes out of Shadows, place up to 3 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck in any order, then draw that many cards. Limit once per round. So he's a big filter engine, basically. But he doesn't actually give you card advantage, because however many you put on the bottom of your deck, you draw back that many. You don't actually gain cards. So I don't think this guy is very good, because if I'm paying this much for a character, he needs to be getting me like actual card advantage, if that's going to be his only ability. Just, I mean, a 4 strength, 2 icons with stealth as a 6 cost is not at all worth it. The ability would be like, even if it was just place, you know, up to 3 on the bottom of your deck, then draw that many cards plus 1. Maybe he'd be okay then, because he'd actually draw you a card. But I think I would really rather just have reaction after a character you control comes out of Shadows, draw a card. I think I'd actually rather have that than this ability. So, interesting sort of idea there, but I don't think this is really very good. Is he still a Lord? Yeah, he's still a Lord. Okay. Now we have Sir Mandon Moore. Seems like they're trying to do Kingsguard stuff with this cycle. We'll see whether that really does anything or not. But this is one of the first Kingsguard characters. He's a Lannister character. 4 cost or Shadow 3, 4 strength, 2 icons. After Sir Mandon Moore comes out of Shadows, choose an opponent. That player must choose and kill a character they control unless they choose and discard 2 cards from their hand. So I think this is a pretty playable card. I think it's nice for Lannister to get another decent character here because, you know, they've been lacking for a while. And this is like basically unconditional. You pay 5, and you can pay a large part of his cost in Challenges phase, which is significant for Lannister. You can pay for him with Goldroad and Tyrion and whatever. And you just do it. He just comes out of Shadows, and they have to either kill something or discard 2. So definitely a decent card, I think. And I mean, like, he has decent stats for his cost. He can come out of Shadows as sort of a surprise. People have to be now worried. Anytime there's a card in Shadows, they can't just assume that it's Robert Strong. It might be this guy. So if you only have 3 gold but not 5, they have to be scared of this. Be like, oh, he might have a 4 strength that's going to come out. I think this is a pretty useful card, and we'll see some play. I imagine myself putting this as a one-of in like basically all my Lannister decks for the foreseeable future. Now we have the Knight of Flowers, another Shadow Kingsguard. This one is Tyrell. After a card you control comes out of Shadows, choose and stand a Kingsguard character, limit twice per round. And he's Shadow 5, Renown, or cost 6. So he's a big character, he's expensive. But he's also, after a card you control comes out of Shadows, he doesn't have a reaction that requires himself to come out of Shadows. Now, he could come out of Shadows himself in order to use the reaction, but it's significant because he's cost 6, so you could reduce him with Great Halls to make him way cheaper, and then just use his reaction with other cards. And especially because he himself is a 5-strength Kingsguard with Renown. I mean, I could definitely see like a Shadows deck where you just marshal him normally, and then use other Shadows cards to use his reaction to stand himself. I think this is definitely a good card for Shadows decks. It will see play in Shadows decks even if there's no other Kingsguard characters in the deck, because he can just target himself. And as we know with Randall, standing a 5-strength Renown character is pretty good. I mean, he doesn't include a strength buff, but still, standing him up and getting extra Renown, extra challenges, I think it'll be very efficient. And now we're down to the last few cards. We have a Martell Shadows card, the Southron Escort, Ally, and Guard. So I guess a little bit more of that Guard sort of trait. We saw one card that, you know, lets guards not kneel to defend or something in the last cycle. Maybe Martell Guards will be a thing, who knows. And they seem to be pushing the Shadows theme a bit more. There's quite a few Shadows cards in this pack, and cards that interact with Shadows. That's good that they're developing the theme more. It was not really developed enough fully yet in the last cycle, so I'm glad there's more cards coming out with Shadows, and I'm glad that they, well, I guess the Littlefinger wasn't that good, but some of them seem pretty good. Now this card, it's 4 cost, or it's Shadow 4, which is very expensive. Shadow 4, then you have to pay 2 to bring it out of Shadows for only a 4 strength, 2 icons with no like keywords or anything. That's bad. But the action is discard another card from Shadows to put Southron Escort into play from Shadows. So this is a card for a Martell Shadows Flea Bottom deck. That's basically what it is. Which is rough because you really want trade routes in those Shadow decks because they tend to get expensive. But if you're playing Flea, actually even if you're not like a dedicated Shadows deck, well no, you do want to be because you have to discard another card from Shadows. So yeah. I think this is a card for a Shadows deck with Flea Bottom because you discard something into the Flea Bottom pile to put this into play, and that's very efficient. But if you're not running Flea Bottom, then this is probably not worth it. Losing card advantage, you know, basically losing a card to get this thing into play is probably not really worth it, would be my guess. We have Viserion, the last of the big Targaryen dragons. We got Drogon and Rhaegal last time. Now we get Viserion. Dragon, Ambush 5, 4 strength, 2 icons. Reaction, after you win a challenge in which Viserion is attacking, discard 1 card from your hand to have Viserion gain Intimidate until the end of the challenge. I think this card is fine. I don't know that it will even see any play. Maybe. I think it's playable. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's particularly good either. I mean, compare it to cards like Greatjon Umber or the 6 cost Euron Crow's Eye. It's considerably worse than those cards with the you know, discarding to get Intimidate and only if you win the challenge compared to you know, Greatjon and that Euron that just always have it and can stand themselves without making you discard, and Euron even giving you card advantage. So I don't really think I'll play this, but who knows? We'll see. Maybe with the new restricted list, Targaryen is back down to not quite having enough good discard effects. So maybe you have this now, like if you're not using Hisdar, then maybe you have space for this. So you have, you're using the discard synergy again, the discard from hand stuff. So like in a Flea Bottom deck, you know, maybe you put this in there and you discard the Second Sons from your hand and do all that junk. Because with Targaryen discarding from hand effects, it's like you want to have a certain amount of them, but you don't want to have too many. Because if you have too many, then you literally just won't have enough cards to discard from your hand to fuel them all. So you sort of want to pick a few that you're going to use and put those in the deck. And one of those used to be Hisdar, you know, 3 copies in every deck, but now with the restricted list, there's actually some choices to be made there. And last, we have the White Sword Tower, the Kingsguard support location. So this is a 2-cost neutral location. Each Kingsguard character you control gets +1 strength, and each player that does not control a Kingsguard character cannot play more than 1 event each phase. I'm not sure if this is worth it even in a Kingsguard deck, because how often is it that you're going to play more than 1 event in a single phase? I mean, I think there's easily like whole games go by where I never play more than 1 event in a single phase. And so in that case, it's just you're giving your Kingsguards +1 strength. And so it's only Kingsguards, it's not every character you control. I guess if Kingsguard gets enough of a critical mass that like half your deck is Kingsguard characters, a 2-cost location that gives half the characters in your deck +1 might be worth it, but I'm leaning towards not. I'm leaning towards this not being good and not being played. But as always, we'll see. So that was the card review for the new pack. I'm sort of getting back into the game again after being kind of lazy and not really playing for a few weeks. I'm definitely excited to be getting new cards. I'm getting more excited about the game again. And hopefully Greyjoy will get hit with a new restricted list soon. So I think that's like the last thing that sort of needs to happen, and then maybe the game will really be in a good spot. But already I think it's considerably better than it has been in the past. And it was never bad. I've never had a point, even at the most times where I've like bitched and complained the most, where I was like, oh, I don't want to play this game anymore, man. My not playing recently was just sort of like, oh, I just kind of got lazy. It's not that I didn't like the game. But yeah, that's it for this one, I guess.